And I didn't know this about you, actually, about you getting started doing stand up. I thought stand up was something that now you had like made it, that you were going to just like take a stroll down some new adventure here, but comedy was the first thing that you got into. So tell me about that, because I have always believed that, well, I've never done it. I know it's hard. I know there's a ton of work that goes into even 1 minute of stage time. I feel like it might be a place for me. I've always been very intrigued by it. What about it drew you into comedy, and what were some of your early experiences like, Dave?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm glad you're asking because, now I do politics and, sometimes I'm kind of funny on my show, but sometimes I'm talking about a lot of serious stuff and that's just not part of the equation. But, when I toured with Jordan and we did 120 stops in about 20 countries in a little over a year, basically I would do like 15 minutes of stand up, crowd work up top, just getting the crowd to have fun because Jordan was going to bring the fire and brimstone stuff for an hour and a half. And then we would like some serious stuff about, sit up straight and let's get this life in order. Right. So I would just make sure that, in front of usually about 4,000 people, like let's get everybody laughing to start. And then we would do a Q&A at the end for about a half hour, the two of us. And I would poke fun at him or mention some of the things that he said. The reason I got into stand up is that my friends were all funny. I suspect it was probably similar for you. I always said to all my, like, somebody was going to be a comedian. It was just obvious. Like we just loved comedy. I remember seeing Naked Gun in the movie theater in 1989. I was 13 years old and a fat man in front of me in the movie theater, I'm sitting in the aisle seat, fell out of his chair laughing. I remember feeling that pain in my stomach from laughing so hard. I still believe Naked Gun is the best comedy movie of all time. Yes, better than Airplane. I will go on the record as saying that. But I always just loved comedy. And, Oscar Wilde, basically, if you want to tell people the truth, you better be funny or they're going to kill you. So when I got out of college, well, actually, the last thing that I did in college, I had already finished all my papers, my last tests, the whole thing. Literally, the last thing I did, I was in a public speaking class and we were told to just give a talk on anything. And I gave like a 8-minute talk about what it was like to be in college. And I talked about sex and I talked about drugs and all sorts of stuff. And I did it while sitting in a chair because my comedy hero from childhood was Bill Cosby. And yes, he turned out to be one of the all-time biggest rapists, but nobody's perfect. But I saw 1983, I was 7 years old. I saw Bill Cosby himself, and that's the famous dentist routine and the chocolate cake and the whole thing. And I just thought, how could you not want to make people laugh? Like, what could possibly be better than this? Flash forward for about 12, 13 years in New York City. I did stand up usually 6 nights a week, usually 2 gigs. I started a bunch of comedy clubs. I was always a hustler. So I saw that the clubs, were really taking advantage of the comics. So me and a couple other comics, we started some underground comedy clubs. And I was one of those guys in Times Square, 2 hours a night in rain nor sleet nor snow. We'd be out there handing out tickets so we could get a little bit of stage time. And, I worked the road for a while and I lived that life. And the funny thing about comedy is that for all of those years of the struggle, and this is before YouTube and all of that stuff, I was just one of 10 guys you'd see. And, I always fiddled around with the crowd. I didn't like to do a lot of like straight up, you're like, what's the deal with this kind of jokes? But now that I've attained some other public level of success, every show that I've done over the last like 4 years, I've sold out every club and I just get up there and I talk to the crowd and we have a great time and I throw t-shirts into the crowd and I get people chatting. And it's more like I'm running a circus than a stand-up show. I don't have the need anymore in a way. One of the things I heard George Carlin give a great little talk on the need about a comic. You got to have a lot of pain and a lot of crazy stuff. We all know this with comics. And that can fuel you for a while. But and here's the trick. The trick is if you want to become great at whatever you do, you have to conquer that pain. What happens to a lot of comedians is they need that pain to keep being funny. And I think this happens to we see this with musicians and all kinds of artists. You can't give up that initial pain, so thus you get destroyed by it. And for me, as my life got better, as I dealt with some of the stuff that I had to deal with, came to terms with myself, whatever it is, I didn't need it as much. So when I go do it now, it's like, I have a freaking ball. Like I just have fun with it. And that's been really nice. But I do wish that more people saw some of that part of me. And hopefully when the country opens up, I'll start doing it again.
What was it that you needed to process?
Oh, well, look, I was closeted for a long time, which, that had a lot to do with it. I was closeted in many ways into my late 20s and at some level almost into my 30s. And, when you're closeted, and by the way, you can be closeted, people think of the closet as just purely about sexuality. But I think if you have some internal issue, whatever that might be, you dealt with an abusive parent, you're closeted about your sexuality, you were hooked on drugs, whatever your thing is, and we've all got something, right? If you don't deal with it head on, and it takes a long time, man, and I still have the scars of some of that stuff. I would say if I have any remaining sort of existential issue in my life, it's that I remember the self-inflicted damage that I did to myself because of that. So I think, look, if you can't get approval from yourself, what's a great way to get approval? Well, a bunch of strangers will laugh at you. You'll say something and a bunch of strangers will laugh at you. And that warmth and that love, man, you can ride that for a long time. But as I just said with the Carlin thing, it's like at some point, if you don't conquer that, if you just want to be, the comic, the neurotic comic, the fat comic, the loser, whatever it is, it's like, man, well, you don't really want to be that. Like, it's good as shtick, but you don't really want to be that. So you got to conquer your stuff. And I don't know that anyone ever fully conquers it, right? Like, that's probably the ultimate challenge in life, that monster that's chasing you. Maybe it just doesn't chase you 90% of the time, but it's always there. It's always there, I think.
It must have been interesting doing stand-up for catharsis, but still not able to talk about the thing that you needed the catharsis from. You see the comedians get up there, they talk about their drug addiction, they talk about their alcoholism, they talk about their failed marriages or their dad or, how they're screw-ups at life and whatnot, and they work some of that stuff out, and you can really see it. Was it hard not actually being able to use it for catharsis in the same way that the comedians do, other comedians?
Well, it was interesting because I was always doing a lot of political stuff and a lot of cultural stuff. I mean, I was making fun of Wolf Blitzer and CNN literally in like 1999. Like, I was doing a lot of that sort of stuff. So my style was like a little more, let's say, a guy like Bill Maher. You don't really know anything about Bill Maher's personal life. I mean, I guess he likes to smoke weed and bang hookers occasionally or something like that.
Those are the first two things that came to mind for me.
Right. But you don't know anything about Bill Maher. That's his style. Then you could take a guy like, or really the best example of this, I would say, is George Carlin and Richard Pryor, because, they're usually the number 1 and 2 in terms of all-time great stand-ups. Well, George Carlin, you knew very, very little about George Carlin. You knew what his worldview was, but not a lot about him. Richard Pryor, he turned it on himself. You knew a lot about the inner workings of Richard Pryor. So it's sort of just stylistically which way you can go with it. So I was doing a lot of stuff that was more cultural than personal. But I can tell you this, I'm not going to say that I didn't get up there and I would, if I made a joke, like the reference was, oh, it was my girlfriend or something, when it just wasn't. And at some point, as my life got better, as I started dealing with that stuff, as I started telling people the truth in my private life, once those two tracks, like, it was sort of like this, my comedy career was going really well, but my life was falling behind. And once I started fixing my life, well, actually the stuff that I was doing on stage started to feel thin because it wasn't as honest. And it wasn't until I lined those two things up that my life really started coming together. So I would say right now I'm playing with a pretty full deck, because I have lined those things up nicely. And again, it ain't perfect.
What you're talking about is something I talk about quite a bit, which is alignment. Alignment between your values, your personal values, your mission in life, your day-to-day actions. When those things are all lined up, you can live in an authentic manner. And you don't need any motivation. You don't need, like, how am I going to find, where's the energy to do all this stuff? No, the only thing that you need then is, like, how do I make my life more efficient so that I can accomplish all these things that I'm propelled towards? Are you feeling propelled these days, Dave?
Oh, yeah. Well, first off, I love what you just said there. I mean, not only propelled, like, I wake up every day this morning. So I'm just back from Florida for these 10 days. So I'm still slightly on East Coast time. So I woke up this morning at about 6. Now, I'm usually a pretty early riser anyway. 6:30, 7 o'clock would be the latest. And I find I'm my best in terms of writing and working for I can basically, like, when I was writing my book, I would get up at, say, 7 a.m. I could write to 2 p.m., sometimes without even eating. I'd have coffee. then it was like when I was done with it, when I closed my computer or closed my notepad, I was like, I'm done for the day. Not that I'm not going to continue doing some level of work, but like if I wake up, I'm ready to roll. But I think because of the alignment that you're talking about, I wake up with purpose every day. Like I could show you my calendar today. I'm interviewing Jordan Peterson later today, which we're holding till his book comes out next week. I'm talking to Clay Travis a little bit later. I'm doing some more stuff for my new book. And it's the stuff that I want to do. Like I'm super busy. I work really hard, but I really love it. And then guess what? When it's done at the end of the day, I mean, you see me on Twitter. I love barbecuing and throwing steaks on the grill. And David, my husband's an incredible chef. And I love great wine. And I'm getting into cocktail making and stuff like that. And I love walking my dog. And my day is freaking full. And like last night, it was about 10 o'clock. And usually I'll just flip on Netflix or I'll turn on YouTube for a little bit and watch like some old basketball games or something like that. But I actually passed out by 10 o'clock just on the couch. I woke up probably 3 a.m., strolled upstairs, went to bed and started again. And it was a pretty great day. And I think when you're really doing what you're supposed to do, time actually changes. You will realize that suddenly you'll be like, holy shit, that was a month that just went by. Like I was in the flow, man. And then you'll get tripped up again. Your old bad habits come back, whatever that stuff is. You're not dealing in your relationships right or whatever. And then time changes and things get worse. And it's on you to know when to fix those things.